in his office.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the Douglas School Committee to order on October 19th at 7 o'clock. Please rise for a pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to read the Douglas Mission Statement for the public schools. The Douglas Public Schools offer a diverse learning experience that meet the academic, social, physical, and emotional needs of all of our students. We provide a safe, supportive, and challenging learning environment in which students may achieve academic success and personal growth. Decisions are made in the best interest of our students. I'd like to call our student representatives, Logan Spano and Selena Cutler, please.
The middle school students have adjusted to the new year and are working hard in their classes and after-school activities. The fall sports are wrapping up. The JV soccer teams have a couple of makeup games, and they will be finishing their seasons. The boys and girls cross-country teams have their final championship race tomorrow at Whitensville Christian School. Students should be thinking about joining a winter sports team. There is a middle school basketball available to boys and girls and cheerleading that is also available. The 7th and 8th graders are allowed to participate in the high school indoor track program.
The after-school enrichment program began this week. There are various activities the students can take part in, and sign-ups have been extended so that anyone that missed the original sign-ups can still join. The 8th grade class went on a STEM field trip to Gillette Stadium on October 5th. They used strategies to build an original NFL team and added new features to their team's stadiums. They also had the opportunity to visit the Hall at Patriot Place and view a documentary on the history of the New England Patriot team. Everyone seemed to have a good time, and as usual, the Douglas students were complimented on their appropriate and polite behavior.
The 8th grade class officers have been elected and the school-wide student council has been formed. Both groups are starting to plan for upcoming events. Ms. Campbell has announced that she is advising the yearbook committee and that she has held a meeting and shared information with interested students.
In the classroom, students have had the opportunity to use various strategies to learn new material. Physical stations have been set up around classrooms for hands-on learning, and technology has been used consistently throughout the school. For example, digital escape rooms are used to master new skills. Music is also a great way to learn, and 8th graders are listening to music in Spanish. This week, the 8th grade class had a speaker from Innovative Pathways meet with them to give information about this program that will be available to them next year throughout the high school. The 7th grade had a speaker on anxiety last week that gave them strategies on how to cope with the stresses of these middle school years.
Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to, at this time, open the floor for public comment. Seeing that we have none, moving on to the old business.
We do not have any.
New business, moving to the
Sure.
superintendent's report.
Thank you. So a couple of updates before we dive into MCAS and STARS. As people know, we're interviewing for an interim dean for the elementary school and the middle school. We had an interview last week. 2 names were forwarded to me as finalists. I met with one of the finalists yesterday. I met with the other finalist today. Mr. DeFonso and Mr. O'Brien will be doing reference checks. I think they started some today. They'll do some tomorrow. We have a meeting at 10:30 on Friday to pick a finalist. They'll be extending an offer to a finalist on Friday, then entering into contract negotiations with them next week. Depending on who we select and what they need to give for enough time, we could have someone here as early as 2 weeks, as late as 3 or 4 weeks. So we're happy that we have people. The 2 people I interviewed, I loved, so I was really happy with the files that came forward, especially having it be October of the school year. So any questions on the dean finals? I know Ms. Salva sat in on the interviews.
Oh, yes, I did, yeah. And so our current dean, Mr. Roonian, he's with us till
Friday.
Friday, okay. All right.
So we'll wrap that up on Friday. Quick process that we had 9 people applied. We offered We extended interviews till 4. We had 3 interviews or 4 interviews?
We offered to 4, we have 3.
Perfect. Okay. Next on the agenda is an update on the dance guidelines. I know that Mrs. Bennett worked diligently with students and her team to put together new dance guidelines. Basically took the form, I think there was like 15 things on there, kind of shrunk it down to about 7 or 8. A lot of them said, don't. Change it from more of a negative tone to, here's what you should be doing. Share that out with students via Google email, share that out with families. So we just want to make sure that we're communicating those expectations to students and families so they know what to be aware of when they come to dances. We have a dance this Saturday night at 6:30. How many signups do we have?
So far, we have 49.50, which actually for a Wednesday is not that bad for a day.
They wait till Friday.
Yeah, they
So,
do.
so I'm happy that we're able to offer that opportunity to some of our students here at the high school.
Just a follow-up, so will we be seeing this letter that went out once you get feedback from the parents and students? Can we actually add that maybe next month,
Sure, I can add it.
just so that we're aware of what the new,
Language says.
yes.
And I apologize for not adding that.
No, it's just an update, because you're going to go through your first trial run on Friday to see, make sure the parents and students, and so pass with flying colors,
We'll be good.
so.
Awesome. All right, next we're going to dive into our MCAS review and update. Before we dive into this, I have a couple of slides I'm going to show before I have Mr. DeFonso come up and start, but just want to highlight, I think I said this before, these represent numbers, but these numbers also represent our students and our teachers. And our kids are more than just a number. Our teachers are more than just a number. Our district is more than just a number and a snapshot in time. We have artists, we have musicians, we have athletes. We have kids that come to us from a variety of backgrounds. We have kids that come to us sometimes in a good place and sometimes not in a good place. We all know that if mentally and here, you're not in a place to learn, doesn't matter what we do for strategies and remediation, you're not going to learn. So I want people to keep that in mind as they look at the data. It is a snapshot in time. On the other end, we know that as kids are getting ready to take the next step in their lives, whether it's going from 8th grade to the 9th grade to private schools or additional schools or going off to college, academics and having that foundation is important. So we try to balance the two as we look at these numbers. So I want to start off with some state trends, and this came from a presentation DESE gave us. They said we can now, I talked to them, we said we can send it out. So I just want to give an overview from the state level at the 100,000 level view before we go down to the building level. So the 22 MCAS showed mixed results compared to 2021. Math scores increased, although unfortunately we did not see that here. ELA scores declined, and science scores increased slightly. I'm not doing science tonight. There's a whole lot of data. We'll do science at another meeting. We have a long way to go from where we were pre-pandemic levels. Again, shouldn't be a surprise. In ELA, two main focus points, especially in our lower grades, the impact of lower writing scores. If you think about it, for 2 years, kids didn't write. They didn't read and write. Our teachers tried and tried and tried, but for that full year of the pandemic, when we were hybrid, it was really tough to do that. So we lost a lot. Everyone in the Commonwealth lost a lot. And then absenteeism remains a challenge, too. So we saw early literacy challenges and writing scores. This was an interesting statistic when you look at the impact of lower writing scores on grades 3 through 8. And this goes back to each of the ELA tests contains a writing component. The number of test takers who received 0 points and were not able to determine whether or not it was 0 because they wrote something and it didn't meet the qualifications, or they just left it blank. But it went from 19% of students scoring a 0 to 31% of students scoring a 0 in 2022. So almost a third of the kids got a 0 in the writing component. That brought the scores down significantly. Absenteeism played a massive part in what happened with scores. So the average student in 2021 missed 11 days of school. Last year, the average student missed 15 days of school. That's almost 10% of the school year. 18% of all students in '21 missed 18 or more school days. Last year, 28%, so almost a third of all students missed 10% of the school year. That's a massive amount of school to miss. We told kids, if you don't feel good, stay home. We told staff, if you don't feel good, stay home. So if kids aren't in school because we told them not to come, because they were sick, and staff's not in school because we told them to stay home, we had, across the Commonwealth, close to a third of our kids miss over 10% of instruction. You're going to see a decline in numbers across the Commonwealth. This is an interesting statistic. Now, to do a little bit of celebrating, I pulled this together quickly today. I looked at 9 of the Blackstone Valley schools, and we have 3 columns here. We have exceeding expectation, student growth percentage, and scaled score. So this is where we rank out of the 9 schools that I looked at in the Valley. In grades 3 through 8 in ELA, we were 4th out of 9th, so right above the halfway point. In math in 3 through 8, and we knew it, we were 6 out of 9. Our 10th grade ELA was 3rd out of the 9 schools, and our math was 5th. So slightly better than the middle. If you look at our student growth percentages, you look at ELA, 8 out of 9th. If you look at math in grades 3 through 8, 6 out of 9th. But if you look at our high school scores, we're number 2 out of 9 for student growth percentage. And then we see scaled scores. In ELA, 3 out of 9. We know we have work to do in math in our elementary and middle schools, 8 out of 9. But in ELA in 10th grade and in math in 10th grade, we were right there, 3rd and 4th out of the 9 schools. That's a lot to celebrate. We have some work to do, and we want to, I'm not satisfied with being average or slightly above average. I want to be more in that, in that 2-3 range. Love to be number 1, but we want to, unlike Cindy who went for 100%, I might go for the 90% to start off. But I pulled that together quickly for people to see that when you're looking at our numbers and you're going to see the decline, because it was a decline from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. This compares us to local Blackstone Valley schools. So we're right there in the ballpark for it. Again, I want to be better than average. Our kids deserve better than average, and I know we can do it, but this is a good starting point going forward. Any questions on these first few slides before I turn it over to Mr. DeFonso? All right, the elementary school. Just tell me when to move slides.
All right.
I have the clicker.
All right. Hey, everyone, how are you? As I trip over myself. How's it
Good
going?
in yourself?
All right, so this screen you're looking at here, the EE stands for exceeding expectations, the M is for meeting expectations, right? So taking the scaled score, and depending on where students fall, that will determine if they're exceeding or meeting. So this percentage that you see here is a combination of those 2 subcategories. So one thing that's interesting that I noticed as a trend, it's not exclusive to Douglas. You'll notice that for the most part, there's a couple outliers, but for the most part, you'll see that the score on the left is Douglas, the score on the right is the state. For the most part, you saw a decrease from 18 to 19 to 21 to 22. So what happened between 19 and 21, we all know, right? So you'll clearly see a dip there. So that's the negative. But the positive that I saw in this, in 3rd grade last year, we scored 2% higher than the state. 4th grade, we were 3 percentage points lower. And then in 5th grade, we were 7 percentage points higher. So that's a big number. So that's something to celebrate, that 2 out of the 3 grades, we exceeded the state performance. So I thought that's a big positive that I felt. So the next slide, so what you see in here, I'm sorry.
Can we just go back for a
Yeah.
minute? I mean, does this 2019 grade 3, 54% versus 56 of the state, I mean, does that, have we looked at that at all? Like that's clearly pre-COVID.
That's pre-COVID, right?
And, grade 3 is lower than the state average.
Right, but what's interesting though, if you look at 18, so the state dipped 9 percentage points from 18 to 19, where we increased 4 percentage points. So that's interesting. So that year, we went up, they went down. So collectively in the 19, it was 2 percentage point differential. That's kind of the anomaly in this chart. It's kind of the outlier. Like that's kind of interesting to go from 9-point differential to 2 points the other way. One of the things in third grade, for a lot of those kids, that's the first time they're being asked to sit down and off the cuff write a 2,000 character, constructed response or selected response. So that's a very tricky year. That's the first time most of them have probably been asked to sit down and write that kind of length of an assignment. So and then obviously 20, there was nothing. That's when COVID hit. And then you started to see, you saw a little bump in 21, and then 22, you saw the state go down 11 percentage points. We went down 6. So from 19 on, we've held our own in terms of, the disparity to, so that's a little bit of an outlier those first 2 years. But I would have to go back to really dive deep into that 2019 year to
I think my question is, because we clearly know that there's changes due to COVID.
Sure.
But is there a combination of factors going on here? That's my question. And you don't have to give me an answer right now, but, I just hope that we're taking everything into consideration as to what could be affecting our kids' scores,
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
But I think for grade 3, that's their first time ever doing it, so they haven't been prepped with the hands-on that they do in the classroom in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, so by the time they get to third grade. So I'm not alarmed by it, just.
No, I'm not looking at, that number makes sense to me. It's this, when I look back here, we should.
But this is the first time they weren't having the prep. They had the prep here in 2019 versus 2022.
Right.
So only one thing that's kind of maybe addressed part of your, so when you say we're looking at it, one of the things we're able to have access to through MCAS's database, through Edwin, is we can get access to each question, each story passage, open response questions, multiple choice questions and get teachers the ability to take from those and utilize them throughout the year to have kids get exposure to it, the type of questions, the type of stories they're being asked to read. So in talking to the teams, I've asked them to try to integrate that at different points throughout the year, whether it's morning work, whether it's a homework assignment, just to get exposure to it, because a lot of it's not even just the content knowledge, a lot of it's just kind of strategy. Like multiple choice questions, you can look at just about every multiple choice question and eliminate 2 of the options. So little things like that. Even the style of how you answer an open response, third grade is the first time they're doing it. A lot of them don't even know how to start it. So those are kind of strategies we're building up, like foundational skills in third grade, to help kind of address that disparity.
One of the declines that we've seen, if you look at third grade, is the MCAS is all done online with a Chromebook. A lot of that Chromebook practice happened in school. Third graders didn't have that, had half of that skill set in first grade, really didn't have a lot of it in second grade, because when they were remote, they were on Zoom, and when they were in front of teachers for the days they were in, we said, put your Chromebooks away, let's interact face to face. So that skill set they had to type and do that, what wasn't there. So that's part of the decline from 21 to 22, and that kids didn't have that muscle memory or that ability to know how to use the Chromebooks.
And I have a 7th grader home, and watching him type on a Chromebook, it's painful. So I worry sometimes that his output is not indicative of his actual ability, because what he can physically produce is not keeping up with what his brain can produce. And then when you don't have a mouse and your kids are trying to click and drag on the mouse pad, they're losing it. They're taking them 6 times to do it. So at that point, they're probably either just moving on, leaving something blank,
Which we saw.
or they just click and see, So that's kind of a couple extraneous factors, but.
Sorry to interrupt.
Is there anything else on this slide that we can talk about?
No, not, it's just, I'm just seeing
No, I agree,
older numbers that are concerning.
No,
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you on that. Yeah. So on this next slide, so the growth scores, so based on, you have a growth score, so third graders do not have a growth score because you need at least 2 years worth of data to have a growth score. So it takes a student's progress from year to year on specific content areas and utilizing the scaled scores to do that, and then the students will be given a percentile. So if you have a 60 percentile, that means you scored either at or above or better than 60% of your peers, basically. So here, our average in 2022, as you can see, was 41. Fifth grade was 49. So for an average of 45. So as a good barometer, the state's median range is 50. So if you're at that 50% growth percentile, that's akin to a year's progress at that 50% mark. So if you're at 50 or above, that's kind of the neighborhood you want to be. You start getting to this high 50s, 60s, you're really killing it and doing a great job. So you can see kind of the trend there. You can see 21 took a hit, but they rebounded quite nicely in 2022. So I was happy to see that we're on an upward trend there.
And one thing we didn't do, and I think we showed it last week, which is unique to us because we're small. I think when Cindy presented her data, when you're only testing 100 kids or 80 kids in a grade level, and you have 3 that don't meet expectation, you can quickly go from 100% to 85% because of 3, 4, 5 kids. When you're looking at a sample size of, like, let's say, one of the urban schools who are testing 10,000 kids. Now you're looking at such a massive, massive, massive number. So when you look into some of these kids, we're at 55, 56, 57%, meeting or exceeding expectations, means the other half aren't. But again, I know that when we've looked at the numbers, we also have a wide, diverse population of students, and in many cases, you're looking at a small subset.
Okay, so here is, for ELA purposes, this is just grade 3. This gives you a breakdown of different subgroups. I certainly don't have to, take you through each one, but you can certainly see, I thought, those are the groups that we actually could get specific data on from DESE. So you can kind of see where we do have some obvious gaps. I don't think anything up there is going to be startlingly surprising to most people. So are there any questions on this particular slide? And for that high needs subgroup, so high needs is a cumulative of students who are EL students, former EL students, low income. So it kind of takes basically a lot of the subgroups kind of as one. So that comprises that, and then you have your students, special education students versus non, male female, which I thought was just kind of interesting, and then the Title I versus non-Title I, and then low income versus non-low income. So it's just a good point of reference for the different categories, demographics that we serve and how they perform, and this is strictly ELA. Just
So it
grade
shows
3.
that we have some equity gaps
Yep,
that we
for
need to
sure.
close.
So same information, just for grade 4. And I think as you can kind of start to see this, you'll start to see sort of a trend as the grade goes through. And the next slide is grade 5. So we're looking at grade 3 in terms of their ELA performance. One of the things I thought was interesting that students entering grade 3 in 2021 basically lost 2 years of your traditional literacy instruction. So I wasn't overly surprised at seeing some of the results. I have a current third grader at home, and he was in first grade, had to learn how to read through a computer. So I'm not surprised so that's just a hypothesis that this is a very likely scenario as to what contributed to some of that performance in third grade. So one of our action plans through Dr. Vieira's ability to secure this, our teachers have had PD last year from our literacy consultant, Claire Landrigan. We're continuing that. She's helping us with our literacy instruction, working one-on-one with teachers, working with students, modeling. And I got to sit in with her last week as she went through, and I thought it was excellent. The teachers really responded to it, really receptive to it. We're building up our library. And another aspect that we're doing is I held data meetings with each of our grade levels to show them their respective MCAS data and their respective STAR data. Just because I'm not sure what was done last year in terms of what they were shown, what they weren't shown. So I said, hey, here are the standards. This is how you did relative to the state in each of the standards. Here's every question I can give you. I can get you access to those questions, and this is where we we're below, this is where we're above. So what's the data telling you? So one of the things, for example, in third grade, our constructive response in production and distribution of writing. So it's pretty consistent that one of our weakest areas was writing. And we talked a little bit about that. This is the first time a student, 8-year-old, is being asked to sit down and write that kind of a sustained writing piece. So one of the things we talked about is to try to give students more opportunities throughout the year for sustained writing pieces, to build that stamina, to get used to that length. Because if you don't do that, and that you wait till, April for the first time to ask an 8-year-old to write, 2,000 characters, it's going to be pretty tough without practice. So that's one of the direct action plans that we're going to work on. Any questions on that? So for fourth grade, again, I was seeing a little bit of a theme, the same thing, the writing piece. Third grade is the first time they're doing this, fourth grade is the second time they're doing this, and you'll start to see when we get to fifth grade, the scores improved in writing. And I don't think that's by accident. Now that's now their third year of doing this. So fourth grade, it's the second time, the second exposure to it, and we kind of want to take the same approach in terms of more opportunities for students. I think with writing especially, I used to teach writing, and I think I found that with my students, the more we did it, the more practice we had, the more opportunities they had to sit with teachers in a small group of one-on-one setting where they got that more individualized feedback. It only helped them. So if you don't get to practice, you're not going to improve. So I think that more conscious practice throughout the year, whether it's something in our curriculum, but I can give teachers exposure to all of the MCAS questions and prompts that they want, and they can practice. MCAS has a website that gives you grade by grade practice tests you can do. So, and it's not teaching to the test because these are all based on Massachusetts state frameworks. So you can take the framework and just use MCAS as a vehicle to teach that standard. You don't have to, but that's the option. So giving kids exposure to that only is going to benefit them. So
is the goal for every classroom to have the same level of rigor in writing?
that's my goal, absolutely.
Okay.
100%. Yeah, and I said that was last time I was a teacher. That was sixth grade ELA was what I taught, and so I'm a firm believer in you have to have a rigorous, dedicated, really deliberate approach to it. For example, I talk to teachers when you're doing writing, I don't want to make graphic organizers an option. That should be a requirement for every student. That's part of the pre-writing process. You get scratch paper on MCAS, use it to make a graphic organizer. There's a reason. You have time. You have all day to do the test. There's no reason every student shouldn't be using that.
Okay.
So that's fourth grade. And in fifth, which was interesting in fifth grade, every standard in fifth grade, we did better than the state in ELA. That's phenomenal. Like that's not common that happens. So, like we talked about, this is now their third year of doing these kind of writing assignments. They've had 2+ years of it, so it stands to reason that they're going to be better at it. So again, in looking at this, I wasn't shocked at that because it does make logical sense, right? So, and I did in talking to the teachers, they made writing they stressed it quite a bit, and the data shows that clearly was stressed in fifth grade. So I want to implore third and fourth grade to take that similar approach so we can get to the same level as fifth grade did in the ELA performance.
And what's interesting is that across the state, they said writing scores, ELA scores declined across the Commonwealth, but in the fifth grade, we actually went up. So sometimes there isn't a rhyme or reason to some of it.
All right, so same as the first slide, this is our combination of students at exceeding expectations and meeting expectations, combined percentage. So you'll see in, so you'll clearly see, unlike ELA where 2 of the 3 grades outperformed the state in math, we underperformed the state in all 3 grades. So you'll see the first was 5% lower, the second was 16% lower, and the third was 20% lower. So I know when I presented my goals, you guys committed those to memory, my goals, right? Reviewed them, you studied them on the weekends. So there's a reason my personal goals this year was math related. So there was a glaring disparity in our math performance. Our ELA performance was solid. Math, we took a hit. obvious, numbers don't lie. So that's why, in working with Dr. Vera, we're looking at different areas, different ways we can potentially get some PD in the building. When I'm meeting with staff, we're talking about goals, at data, I'm showing them. I cut and pasted every single math question for each of the grades MCAS and shared it with each of the grades, so implore them to use that when they can. Like I said, pull it out, use it as practice, as a morning homework assignment here and there, just to get kids exposure to it. And this kind of piggybacks nicely with the literacy we're doing, because where math can be, especially word problems, can be so wordy. If you have a student who's struggling to read, they're not even going to understand what the question's being asked, and that's half the battle. Sometimes you go online, try to read one of those questions, you're going to get to the end of the paragraph and say, wait a minute, what are they asking? So that's a big piece to really break that down. So that's another area where, in meeting with teachers during the common plan time, we're making it a point to be more dedicated to that. Like the other slide, this is their student growth percentiles. You'll kind of see, so this is kind of an interesting, like for grade 4, 18 to 19 down by 12, but then last year back up. Grade 5 down from 33 to 30, up to 38, but down to 19 and back to 40. So that's, again, another big jump, right? So again, you'll notice that though, that 19 to 21 window kind of threw everything out of whack, and there's almost no rhyme or reason to some of this, except that's what that is when COVID happened. Is that directly related? Possibly, maybe not, but you can't argue that it wasn't an impactful factor. And then this just goes back to the next 3 slides are each grade level equity gaps as it relates to math, and as you'll see in most of the columns, you're seeing similar disparities. So we have equity gaps clearly in both subject areas. This is just specific numbers for you guys to digest. And then we're good here. And for math, one of the things that we looked at is, for example, geometry is traditionally we've seen as an area of weakness. In looking at the curriculum map and asking the teachers, my hypothesis was, well, maybe when is geometry taught in the year? Because my guess is it's probably later in the year. So I was talking to teachers, said it's later in spring. That's not it's not a shock that was an area of weakness. So what's an action plan? What can we do to that? Give students more exposure to that earlier in the year, integrate it earlier. I'm not saying just completely overhaul the curriculum, but there are times when, one teacher was talking about, all right, have a dedicated time on Fridays to look at geometry or look at fractions, whatever the case may be, to get those kids that exposure so they're seeing it throughout the year. Because if you're not going to show it to them until April, because that's what the curriculum states to do, well, you can't expect them in May to master that on the MCAS. So again, it's a fairly logical way to look at it, and that's what we're going to make a conscious effort to do.
But does the geometry also carry through to the other grades as well?
Yeah.
So you're seeing it even beyond that spring?
You bet.
In 3rd grade?
Yeah. Yep. The way our math was, it's spiraling. Again, so part of I know this is math, but the constructive response scores for 3rd grade was also low, very similar to the reasons. Writing is hard enough, writing about math, that's a whole different animal. So they're struggling enough just to write about a story they read, let alone trying to explain a math problem that they might not even fully understand or be able to do the computation within that math problem. So it's a pretty, again, I think, not to beat a dead horse, but that exposure to it and more exposure to it is going to help them. And, if a teacher's able to sit with them in that small group, I know small group might be an overused term, but if you can sit with a student, maybe 3 at a group, and really hammer home some strategies and where these breakdowns are happening, that's where you're going to see gains made. 4th grade, instead of geometry, measurement and data, 13% less than the state, right? And then when I met with the 4th grade team, I asked them the same question: when do you guys cover this? Later in the spring. Again, so we're seeing, kind of to piggyback what you said, Monique, we're seeing this at other grades too. This is not just an isolation in a vacuum. That's fourth grade. It's measurement and data later in the year, geometry later in the year. So what can we do about it? You know, so attacking that and integrating it throughout the year is going to, I think, make a difference. Fractions, we saw the same thing, 15% less in the state. Right, these are topics covered later in the year. And not saying that this is going to be the magic panacea for, you know, massive success, but I'd be very, very surprised if it did not make a difference. Grade 5, again, like you had said, Monique, we're seeing this geometry again, 18% less than the state. This is not a coincidence, right? So, and then looking at this, that was the thing that kind of jumped out at me as I was going through the different standards and said, oh, wow, we're seeing geometry, we're seeing measurement, and we're seeing fractions consistently coming up as issues. Well, what are we going to do about it? All right? Well, you can't just invent new things. So what can you do? Tweak how you do things. Don't just do the same thing over and over again, because it's going to keep happening over and over again. So proactively, let's attack it in a different way. Let's integrate it more where we can. Let's give kids. One teacher had a great idea. She was going to talk about having a Fraction Friday, right? So, you know, hey, if it's just something that they know they'll get exposure to on a weekly basis, even that's going to help them. No doubt about it. It's going to help them.
So how are they talking about putting like something like geometry, doing more geometry in the school year? Like, are the teams coming together and having a conversation about
Yeah, so I sat
how
with-
we can put it in more times in the year?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, so I sat with each team, we talked about it together, and we discussed different ways in which we can integrate it. Whether it's part of the math block, whether it's part of morning work, whether it's part of whatever it's a homework assignment, in different areas you can strategically expose kids to it. So wherever, whenever, and I've tried to empower them to have that flexibility to do so. They're professionals, they know when it's appropriate, but let's do that. And let's see next year if it makes a difference. I think it will.
Okay.
That's it. Any questions, guys?
And before I bring Mr. Ryan up, at the beginning of the year, we talked a little bit about MTSS. We talked about the kids' academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs. A lot of what we saw here today, we can measure the academic piece, but we're also doing a lot for the SEL piece. Mr. DeFonzo's up here now. His good news call of the day, that helps build the kids' SEL. The enrichment program after school, that helps students build connections. The PD that Dr. Merrick is doing with staff around helping support the behavioral needs of kids. Tough to measure that on a pen and paper test, but all those other things we do to address the needs of the whole child will ultimately positively impact our students. This here just highlights the academic piece and how we can measure it. We're doing a bunch of stuff for the SEL and for the behavioral needs of our students.
I mean, without a social emotional piece, you are going to have lower scores.
Correct.
So,
Are you seeing, you know, with all those things that you have implemented, which are wonderful, and I love to see, you know, that whether engagement has changed at all? I know it's still early in the year,
With
but
families or staff?
with the students.
I think so. I think I'm seeing it with staff as well.
Okay.
For example, we started a culture and climate committee. It started out with 3 of us. It's now doubled.
Okay.
We have, one of the things in Dr. Vera's blueprint we talked about is engaging families who otherwise might not be involved. And I'm not saying social media is the only vehicle, but I think combined we have about 200 plus people following our social media sites. Those people might not otherwise know what's happening at school. Right? They might not be checking their student's backpack, but most 9 out of 10 people are on their phone. So that's an effective way to communicate to get those other people otherwise not involved. You know, working with the PTO, promoting their events. So I do believe we're seeing a greater engagement. Even something like we have in our hallway, we do a brain teaser of the day. Kids come in, they love seeing that. They'll pop in and try to see if they have the answer. Little things like that. Parents are even doing it. Little things like that, you're seeing kids just interact more with us, interact more. We had a ton of people sign up for our after-school enrichment program. So the numbers are excellent. So I firmly believe we're seeing a lot of engagement.
Do you know what your numbers are for the enrichment program?
Top of my head, don't, but we must have 8 or 9 classes running. And it's highly, I mean, the signups came pouring in.
That's
They
more
offer
than what
everything
we had
from-
before COVID.
There's
so-
crafts, there's mindfulness, there's basketball, so not just a student who's a good athlete, not just a student who, so that's great. It's a very multimodal kind of approach, which I think is very appropriate.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You what?
Mr. O'Brien.
Good evening. I'm lucky enough to work with some amazing educators, and you can see that in some of the numbers here. And as Dr. Vieira was talking about the SEL skills, we had a rough year last year, coming off of COVID and moving into that classroom, and a lot of behaviors that we thought were unexplained, just you would expect, we weren't there. And COVID threw the kids for a loop. That being said, I'm really proud of the teachers at the middle school for the work that they did, bringing them up to par. Got a lot of work to do still, but it's a great step. Looking at the 4-year data trends, just in grade 6, ELA growth scores were 66%. That's absolutely incredible. So as we look at the numbers, I said, why does 23 jump out at us as much as the 66? I was told once a long time ago that it takes 3 years of teaching the same subject to be fair and an expert at it. And I think teams take that long. So our 6th grade team took several years to get to where they are right now. Our 7th grade team is pretty new. We have a second-year teacher, a first-year teacher, someone that came down from the high school. So there is some learning curves for them as educators. They're working their tails off. I applaud them. Also, 7th grade, and for you that have children that went through middle school, the worst year in all of their schooling is 7th grade, for numbers of reasons, but it's a tough year. So to get them to concentrate on that, it's tough. But you can see back in 2018, at that 60%, that was a different team that had a lot of time to come together. And, that was a solid team, and unfortunately, well, people retire, people move on, so we got a new team there. I am proud of the 4-year average. It's a grade 8 at 46%, because they're just getting into that teaming too. And we're really seeing, especially with grade 6, that payoff of the common planning time. Students exceeding or meeting expectation. The numbers right there, again, yeah, 7th grade takes a dip. And I had the teachers write up their own hypothesis and action plans as groups, so they could look at the data and realize their feedback as well. But one of the things we have to do is, we can't wait until the MCAS, which is the autopsy. We can't wait until that time. We have to do formative assessments throughout the year, so we can see where the gaps are, correct them, and move forward.
Do you have any information on what are some of the action plans that they're looking at? Oh, yeah, you do later on. Okay, okay.
Again, students with high needs definitely need a lot more work, a lot more supports to get stronger in their academics. And especially in middle school, where they start realizing self more, and much more, peer interactions are much more important at this age. It is a challenge. And I don't know if there's any of us that would go back to 7th grade.
Nope.
So looking at the curriculum analysis, I think the reason why 6th grade did so well is because they used that common planning time so wisely. When we had PD, what was it, about a week and a half ago, we found out that we have over 600 years of experience in the middle school as educators. What we're trying to do this year is have teachers that excel at that craft work with other teachers so they can learn from each other. I want to say, too, this is not just math and ELA teachers, this is the whole school. As you talked about the culture and the climate, that's all the teachers pay attention to that you try to bring all the kids in to feel safe and supported. We're also looking at expanding our writing opportunities in other areas besides just ELA. So we have reading across the curriculum for grade 8, writing across the curriculum for grade 7.
One thing that's pretty unique.
I'm sorry, grade 6, reading across the curriculum.
One thing that's pretty awesome about the middle school, and I see it because I'm there every day, and I know it's happening in other buildings, is you walk the halls and you see in between periods, you see a math teacher talking to an English teacher talking to a social studies teacher. They're always talking, they're always communicating, they're always exchanging information. I see it in the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th grade. I know what happens in the other buildings, but I see it more in the middle school because I'm there every day. So that level of communication about talking about kids is so important.
So I have a question from Beth. Wants me to ask you how the MCAS data lines line up with the NWEA benchmark testing.
So with the NWEA, we did that 3 times a year last year. I'd like to see that expanded to 4 times a year this year. That makes a prediction on what the student would score on the MCAS. So say, here's their test, this is what how it would play out if this was an MCAS score. So NWA gives a good prediction of what their MCAS scores would be. The tricky thing is making sure the students take the test serious, that they're putting their effort into it. So on the NWEA, different than the MCAS, NWEA, we can see how long they spent on the test. So if a student finishes a 30-question assessment, 30 seconds, we know they're just blasting through it. If a teacher sees that, they try to bring them out and call them back. As we saw with the state data, that 0%, we don't know, there's not a timer on the MCAS to do it. I would like to have the kids have the ability to take the MCAS on their phone, because their texting skills are amazing, and they could write volumes, they could write War and Peace in about 5 seconds on a cell phone. Scotty, can you get an adaptation for the Chromebooks? Moving to grade 7, again, as you heard across the board, just increase their writing stamina. They just don't have that muscle worked out as well as they should. The other hypothesis, there was a couple of rearrangements in the middle school schedule over the past few years. So looking at that, say, all right, well, we're losing some class time, but to make up for it, that common planning time, and I think is so important. And I think once we nail that down, each grade-wise, we'll see the scores increase dramatically. So what are we doing there? We're planning out our units together. And more importantly, we're planning out the assessments. Are what we're asking for kids to do in a class the same as what they're asking on an MCAS? So for example, percentage. If you only ask what's 50% of 100, even a building principal could figure that out. But if you add a multiple step question, and can they really apply the knowledge, that's where it gets challenging. So we're trying to make more MCAS style or more rigorous questions a regular occurrence throughout each unit that they teach. Also, grade 7 looked back and they saw the 6th grade was doing well. And they did an MCAS. Oh, this is math. I'm just jumping ahead. They did an MCAS problem of the day for math. So they incorporated it this year, just to have that everything. So by having the teachers observe each other and work with each other, it's going to pay huge dividends.
Are the 7th grade team getting, that mentorship on the best use of common planning time?
We are doing that this year. Yeah,
Okay.
that's part of it. A big piece, and you talked about that, was the engagement. How do we get these kids that are much more concerned with their parents and peer approval? How do we get them engaged where learning becomes, okay, this is what I should be doing?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we found out in the grade 8 was they were comparing 2 separate stories in the same questions. That was new to the students, and the staff was like, that's kind of a curveball by the MCAS too. 2 separate readings and going back and forth. So instead of having them read and do one excerpt and one issue, they're making that connection to the MCAS of how they actually assess their students with that. On math, very similar to the other grades, to ELA. We did see a big dip in grade 7, and we did see some growth elsewhere up here, opposed to the state average. But I did see that one of our highest, we had a student that had a 91 percentile growth. And some of our highest growth for those individuals happened in 7th grade. So when you look at someone that get almost 2 years of learning in 1 year as an individual, that's what do they do for that child? So we were able to ask what happened. Why did this kid respond so well and others did not? So is grade 7 on the overall scores look a little tough? Some of the individual students, they helped made dramatic gains. The full-year trend growth, you can see that 2021, it took a huge dip, and then we're back about a 50%. Talking to the staff, our goal is to have 90% exceeding a meeting expectation. For the equity, students that that have been dealt a tough hand, they have a tough time. So what can we do to provide those supports to bring those students up? And looking at some of the students that had succeeded so well, why did that student respond to those supports and others didn't? So as superintendent did say, it's a lot more than numbers. We're talking about individuals, but the numbers help us find out how do we help that individual. So one of the goals that we're working on this year as well at the middle school is to make sure that we track and we inventory what strategies we're using to see if that makes sense. So if a student's having trouble with homework, right, what intervention did we use to solve that problem? And that's data they can take to the next year, to the next grade, to the next grade, to the next grade. I think too often things are kind of done in silos in education, in our own little building, in our classroom. So trying to get that cooperation between grades, between schools will work well. The math equity in 2022 made a big jump from 2021. Come on, grade 8.
Grade 8,
Thank you.
sorry.
You can see it went up from 28% to 43% on the equity gaps. Again, in math, the grade 6 does that MCAS question every morning in homeroom. That's been expanded to the 7th grade. And out of the 40 questions, grade 6 scored 10% or higher than a state average on 25% of those questions. And so when you pull it up on the DESE's webpage and it's Edwin, they have where you need help in red and the other one in black. And when you jumped on the sixth grade page, it really jumped out at you that you didn't see any red. Seventh grade, again, making sure that our curriculum lines up with the state standards and that we teach everything as early as possible and then use the last month of school to reteach so they get all that information as opposed to going a mile wide and an inch deep. Just really get those standards knocked down. Grade 8, we found that they could not make a connection between like the basic Pythagorean theorem and other applications. So how do they take their textbook or their Chromebook knowledge and transfer those skills to other subjects and to other, even within the same subject, how do we transfer those skills around? I am excited to show off the middle school scores next year because I think we're trending in the right direction.
Thank you.
We have mid-October. You know, Bob used the word autopsy, and MCAS scores don't get released till early September. So we've only had them for about a month. So this is a lot of work the principals and classroom teachers have done in 1 month, while also trying to get their classroom set up, while also trying to get routines set up, while also trying to get to learn their kids. But also going back and diving into the state. It'd be great if we could get it mid to end of May. But a lot of times the assessments are still giving in early to mid-May. So we're not getting this until early September, and then it takes about a month to dive into it. You can see the level of analysis. The first few pages is just a cut and paste and a copy the statistics, but really to look at that curriculum analysis piece, the item analysis piece, and dive down to see why the scores are what they are. That takes a lot of time, and again, we're not getting that information till early to mid-September.
No, I mean, I appreciate that, and I think that, you know, there's stuff that we can clearly do now, and I think I've
Yeah.
heard it in the presentations, and I'm really happy to hear that we are mobilizing quickly where we can. I also like hearing that we're planning on doing more frequent check-ins with the testings and with the data, so that we can make sure that we're on track and we don't find out at the end of the year that, oh, what we did last year didn't, you know, work very well, because that would be disastrous. It's a whole year lost for some kids. So I appreciate that we're increasing our data checks throughout the year. That's going to be critical. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Bennett?
Just one question. When will the individual MCAS scores be coming out to the families?
We talked about mailing them out middle to end of this week.
Yeah, I saw Ms. Gosnell was stuffing envelopes the last 2 days. The state used to send them out themselves. Now they
Right.
send them to the schools, so we pay for the postage and send them out. Should we go out this week?
Mr. DeFonso, here's it.
Yeah, they'll all go out from, I think that's the central office, the location right around the same time.
We want to send them all out on the same day, so if you have students in 3 different buildings, we're not getting although it might be a day apart depending on the mail, we want to try to all get them out the first day, so middle to end of this week, they'll go out. I think they only came in last week, correct?
Yeah, middle of last week.
Yeah.
Good evening. I think you might already have the MCAS scores from the high school. Already got
Oh,
them.
you already mailed them out?
I think so. All right, so just again, really, you'll hear some of the same emphasis from the previous presentations, but just again, the work that our staff does here goes way beyond just our English and our math teachers, which are the scores that are being presented here. Really are excited. I'm excited when I have conversations with my history teachers or with my science teachers, and they recognize the importance the important role that they play in terms of this number that comes out and the support with MCAS. So it's, we've had some really nice conversations of how can we support each other here at the high school. So you'll see here, we have our grade 10 English data right here in front, and you'll see across the board that grade 10 here, according to the state, we do nice work here. I'd say we at a plus 12 for 2022. That's good, significant overall increase, or what the exceeds expectations and met expectations. So nice work there. In terms of our growth scores, again, you can see that the growth is, I'd say it's similar. I mean, we have different numbers, but when you look overall, we're over the 50%, which is a benchmark that we like to see, and we're appreciative of that. Always looking to continue that growth, and so we will be looking at the growth scores a little more in depth in bringing in our special educators as well to help us with that as we're looking at our subset areas with the growth scores. And that will be both in math and English. So there are a few more numbers on this chart, because when I look at the chart, I like to have the N. I like to know what the number is and how many people I'm speaking to. So I put that in there. I apologize if it's a little cumbersome. I had this dialogue with my husband back and forth, who looks at charts all the time, and I went, I'll put it in a different color. I said, for me, I need to know the N when I look at this. So again, as you look across the board, where you can see where our areas are. It's our students with disability, or it's our low income. And we also see that that our males seem to be a little bit lower in percentage compared to our females as well. And that's been something that we've just seen. And that's been, I don't know if I want to call it a trend, but to some degree it is a trend. So I don't have that specific answer right now, because for as long as I've been in education, that is something that we consistently have to look at, is how do we engage our males? And sometimes it's more specific in like our English topics, in our English areas. But you'll see here it's kind of both in English and math as well. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at in our AP data as well. So hopefully we'll come up with some, as the conversations with our common planning time, we'll come up with some ideas. Or I'll learn ideas as well. I mean, I'm still very much in the learning stage in terms of all the instruction and the happenings from our staff. But again, you'll see here that we, overall, 73% of our 89 students do score in the exceeding expectations and met expectations. I will share that both in math and English, we are really going to dive into that N of our students in the high meeting expectations number, because the percentage, even though we're clumping them together, the larger percentage is actually in our met expectations. And so that's something that we'd really like to have those students break over that edge for a number of reasons. And it's not just, again, the number gets clumped in here, but for their personal gain as well. It's like, you know, what is it? And you'll hear me say, is it a test-taking piece? Is it the use of technology? You know, what is it that might be able to help bump some of these students from that met expectation to exceeding, and from the lower levels into the met expectations? So that's something that we will have dialogue with throughout all of our departments. Again, not just math and English. So our staff, the teachers, again, in the analysis on English also had some eyes on the history. I also give English, I also give the English data to our math teachers as well. So, you know, what is our data telling us is that we're just above state average. Okay, so we're good, we're there, we're above state average in our ELA domains. Domains have, in English, they have the 3 domains of language, reading, and writing. The areas that were identified, that I just identified, are lower in the meeting expectations and the exceeding expectations. So, you know, are the factors including access to curriculum, maybe motivation, learning styles for some of those groups? I think that's where our focus with the MTSS and a lot of the conversation that we've had in the PD with the Tier 1 strategies, and something that we will continue throughout the school year. I'm hopeful that trying some new strategies, bringing in new ideas, having that collaboration, and providing the team the time to specifically talk about that during common planning time will help bring some of those areas to a higher level and to the students, you know, in terms of their skill level. And then with the ELA, as we were looking at the questions, it was, so you have a long passage, and you've heard this, right? We're kind of calling it fatigue, so the test-taking fatigue. So the passage could be 6 passages or 6 paragraphs long, right? And so a student needs, in the question, there could be 4 or 5 parts in that one question. And so question 1 is asking you go to paragraph 2, and then you have to go to paragraph 3 for question 2, paragraph 4, and then you're comparing or doing an analysis with paragraph 2 and 4, and then you have the final question. And so where are students with all that? You know, where are our students in terms of, are they fatigued because it's a 6-passage essay that they're reading, or a short story, and they have to do those 4 parts or 5 parts for each? And then is it possibly some technical motivation or navigation, as was noted before? I think Mr. DeFonso said just even the touchpad. I mean, as much as I use the touchpad, there are times that I just kind of go, you got to be kidding me, because it does. It goes away. and you'll go, where did the screen go? What happened? So, you know, conversations and questions that I've been asking so I can learn is, what type of preparation are we doing with our students or the test taking. And so when I say test taken, to some degree, it is, as indicated in this second analysis, reading text and working compare and contrast. But are they prepared and, are they able to navigate, as much as we see them on their phones and doing this, are they really truly able to navigate that Chromebook and go from one passage to a split screen and do this and do that, which is the level at the high school that they need to do. So those are conversations that have taken place, will continue to take place, and those are suggestions that are being discussed, not again just in English, but in all of our departments to help that student development. And learning what happens down at the middle of school as well. I still need to learn what skills are the students coming up with as well, so that we can have those dialogues and say, well, this is what we're seeing, how might you be able to help us in terms of the development of the students coming up to the high school? Any questions? I'm sorry, I didn't pause to ask for any questions. In regards to the item analysis, again, I already somewhat noted the test taker fatigue, as we indicated, technology navigation. The multi-part questions did prove more challenging for the students, and again, we're not sure on the scoring end. We know with essays they get partial credit, but I believe they do not get anything for those short answers where they do have 4 or 5 questions within one answer, or 4 or 5 parts within one. So we're just not sure where that all falls in for our students. So again, the increase of using this type of questioning format is something that we're going to be using across the board. And the writing domain did seem to have the lowest overall scores. It was interesting. The essay this past year was an argumentative essay that where the topic was sports. So if someone doesn't care about sports, that just might not interest them, which is just a reality. And then students had to write their answer, however, in a form of a speech, which is a different style than what has been previously asked on MCAS. So just the dialogue and the conversation specifically amongst English was just to, again, focus the craft of writing effective arguments, because that would really help support the students, not just in the writing, but also in life, right, in their oral presentation, in their verbal presentations as well. But that was, it was just interesting to see the scores with that and then the type of essay that they had. In regards to, any questions with that? In regards to math, again, you'll see here that we are above the average this past year, but again, we're just kind of right there in terms of the students meeting or exceeding expectations. Our growth scores, again, for this year, definitely improved, which is nice over the past 3 years. And so we were pleased to see us above the 50% there in math. So great job with that, and we will continue to work in our areas. So again, you'll see our areas of need very similar to what we are seeing in English in regards to some of the lower groups. Again, you can see the ends, and so very much that's where our conversation with our special ed teachers are going to come in to really see how they might be able to help us and how we can hone in and identify those individuals as well to get them into the met expectations. Analysis with math, overall state average. However, we did see the subgroups as indicated or identified that had significantly lower achievement. So again, could that be access to curriculum, motivation, learning styles, or even maturation in terms of when we're talking math? There is that level there and that complexity. I can tell you that, just through my years of experience and practice with the data analysis, the math has become better for me and easier for me. But even coming, I remember my grad school and doing all that it's something that does take practice, and I do think maturation does have something to do with that growth. So again, we will continue to focus on implementing the Tier 1 instructional practices to engage our learners that we have been talking about since our first PD day. Analysis here is, again, we see compared to the state, we had some domains and pockets of strength such as congruence and polynomials, but we also had some weaknesses with interpreting functions in linear and as well as quadratic and exponential models. I will share with you that those areas had one question on the test, one question. So again, are we going to focus time? We are. I mean, we were like -11, -14 compared to the state. It's one question. So we're really honing in on those questions that had more, 3, 4, 5 questions, to really see how we can focus on that improvement, because those scores were either state average or maybe at the, between the -4 and -8% in terms of being lower from the state, and some even had higher. So we're really going to kind of hone in on some of those, appreciate the one question, but is that an anomaly? You know, we don't necessarily know. You know, how
That's
can
what's-
we address that?
Yeah, and Mrs. Bennett brings up a great point. A lot of times you see that happen on the MCAS where you'll see it for 4 or 5 years, one question, one question, one question, one question, and then after 5 years, you'll get 5.
Right.
And then it'll go back to one question, one question, one question, and it goes back to 5. So that is tough when you see something like that where you're below the state average by 10, 15, 20%, but when you dive down, it was just one question.
One question.
In that area.
So it's, you know, just, you wonder in that area. So, yeah, I can be done.
Is that it?
It is pretty much done with
Okay.
that. Again, it was just, the focus again would be, and it's somewhat related to English as well, it's just being able to make sure that they're constructing a solid response, because there is writing. It's not just the math, there is actually writing in the math as well in terms of answers. So it's making sure that the students are able to identify all the parts in the question and that they're answering all the parts. And again, that was seen in the English portion as well.
Did we have any students that didn't meet? Because I know it's a requirement to graduate for 10th grade.
So we do have some students that will be retesting. We have 3 in math and 7, 8 in ELA.
Okay.
Not all of them came through Douglas.
What are
We
we
do
doing?
have some of our student choice students as well, that, because we get their scores, we have to
Yep.
get their scores, that will be taking the retest.
Are we doing anything remediation-wise to help them prepare for, like, focus groups that they're working on together?
So right now, our 3 students with the math, I know that Ms. O'Brien, who really leads and heads on with the retest, she's having the conversations with the students and connecting with the teachers as well. And then with it being such a small group, that's the focus where we're working right now. And those are 2 weeks away? 3, 2 and a half, coming up, around the corner. It's the middle of November.
And when will we get the scores for them?
The scores for retest, are they quicker?
They're usually
Dr.
6 to
Beer?
8 weeks,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was going to say, it's usually about 6 weeks that we will get those. So just in case that happens, there's another retest in the spring.
So I think we need, I'd like to track that, just to see, make sure, because I know COVID and everything else, we're going to have these anomalies, and what are we
Right.
doing to make sure these kids can graduate? That's, for me, is very important. 'cause it's-
Without a doubt, without
So-
a doubt.
So, that's all. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question, and not specifically for you necessarily, but I am looking here on the equity data across all the schools, and I'm noticing that where we've always been lowest is with students with disabilities and versus non-disabled.
Yep.
And yet post-COVID, we've lost whatever ground we had at one time. So I'm wondering what specifically is happening at that level in terms of this data and trying to improve these numbers? Maybe Dr. Merrick, I don't know if you have any thoughts you could share on that.
I'm on the spot here. And to be honest with you, I have to do a deep dive analysis into the specific students that we're referencing here, because those are the small numbers, and I don't want to make general broad plans without really deep dive analysis into the kids. So I can report on that.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
I would say that is not unique to Douglas, though. That is, kind of statewide is what's happening as well.
You're taking your most fragile population in an extremely fragile time, and you're going to see the gaps
And
widen.
they're not allowed to ask questions or help for assistance, and so, I mean, they're out of practice of doing it independently, so for me, I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised. I just wanted to get a sense of what are we doing to try to
It's a worthy
remediate.
question, and I will do a deep dive on it.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We're going to call Mr. DeFonso and Mrs. Socia to come up and talk about some of the STARS data, but I know we've spent an hour or so already talking about data and teaching and learning, and it's a lot of information, but it's just so much better than talking about masking and not masking. It's great to get back
We're excited to see
to
this.
having a conversation about teaching and learning and students and what's going on inside the classroom and how we can improve achievement, and not talking about screen time versus not screen time and zooming versus not zooming and masking versus not masking. So this is,
Seeing the students so excited.
and seeing students excited, so.
Fantastic.
So I know it's a lot of information, but it's refreshing after 2 years of COVID.
And when the
Hey,
scores come-
you brought up health, so how is the overall health of the school?
The overall health of the school, so we've been tracking the numbers, and we've been
Just like in general, not COVID, but just like people, people feeling good, people coming to school, good attendance.
We've had a couple of blips with attendance at different times over the course of the year, but our COVID numbers, we've been tracking, they're consistent with where the state average is. We have we've had periods, we've had 2-3 kids in a building, COVID positive, we've had blips, we've had 6 or 7 kids with COVID positive. I'm still tracking wastewater, which seems to be the most accurate way to track the
Like no
information.
no major like outbreaks of stuff or flus or,
No.
kids are going to school.
Hold on. No, nothing yet. But, and the toughest
Yeah.
stuff when we're getting the numbers from the state is not, that's only people who are going and getting tested. If you're not self-reporting, you're not doing it. So the wastewater really is the best way to track it. All right.
All right, we're on. Okay, so tonight we are talking about the end of the year data. That was the question. What were we going to do with last year's end of the year assessment? And part of that was to send it along with the students, and part of it was placement and things like that. So one thing that I want to point out to everyone, seeing that we've been talking about MCAS, the STAR Renaissance is not like MCAS in the sense that there's no item analysis. We don't see the questions. The teachers don't see the questions unless they're actually looking over at the student taking the assessment. So there's nothing coming back to us in a report saying, all right, 80% got number 5 wrong. Let's go back to number 5 and see what it was. We don't have access to that. Partly because as the students are taking the assessment, they're being calibrated. So if they get the question wrong, then 3 in a row, they might drop them down a level. So they're leveling them as they're taking that assessment. So it is a little bit different. The other thing is we are not able to access last year's reports on the students. We can only access what the teachers have right now. So we've learned our lesson. We need to print out a lot of the reports ourselves, so we had to do a lot of digging. Some of the Title I people helped us out because they did print things out. So that makes it a little trickier, but, so just so you know. And the first charts, those are the ones that we presented last year. So the grade 1 math, there's no assessment for K, for kindergarten in math. What STAR is telling us is they've embedded a couple of questions in math into their early literacy, but it's really not enough for us to really assess in math. So on this one, we had assessed 65 students at the end of the year. So in the math, it wasn't too bad. We had 56 that were at or above and only 9 that were not meeting the benchmark.
All right, so for grade 2, you can see the percentage right there, and just actually turn those percentages into students, we had in grade 2, 60%, I'm sorry, not 60 students were at or above benchmark, which is where that 57% translated to in terms of actual student numbers. So it's this kind of the data makes sense. So beginning of the year, they made a big leap from beginning of the year to middle of the year, but then it was obviously a 2% dip, as you can see. So the content's getting harder, it's getting a little bit more complex. So not completely surprised to see that, but it's obviously a number we'd like to see on the other side, obviously. So for grade 3, that 76% figure translates to 64 students at or above benchmark. So in grade 2 and 3, so basically 67% of the students were at or above benchmark at the end of the year.
How many are at urgent intervention for grade 2 and 3?
For grade 3,
And for grade 2?
so I would just have to do the math. So we have for grade 2 we had 97 students. So urgent is 4%. So so maybe like 13 to 14 kids maybe. If you did the math really quick. And then so urgent here is 3%.
Is that 3% at mid-year or 6% at end of the year?
I'm sorry, 6%, so sorry. So you had, so in grade 3, you had 85 students. 10% is 8, 5%, 4, so about 5 kids.
4.5-ish, yeah.
Quick math.
And every student takes the test, correct?
Not every student took every test.
Okay.
But it's very high percentage do.
Okay.
But I would say for going forward, if we could just have the number of students in each grade, that'll kind of help us do the math.
So that is in a slide slide further down.
Okay.
So I was curious, because fourth grade increased throughout the year, even at the end, in ELA and math, when I looked at this data. And in other grades, we didn't see continued growth past the mid-benchmark. Any thoughts as to what might be, why we might not see that continued growth at the end of the year?
For me, I'm going to address that further
Okay.
into the presentation.
Okay.
We're still in that thought.
Sorry, it's like, oh, it's a burning question, sorry, sorry.
So Heather, that was to answer your question earlier about. so the
Thank you.
slide right there.
Yep.
Okay, so even though kindergarten does not take the math, I had the teachers really analyze what they do for assessments in their classes. And it could be from the Go Math, it could be from some of their just running records, some of their quick assessments. And what their overall analysis brought them to was a weakness that, or someplace we can do better on number recognition. And so we've changed a lot of what we've been doing in kindergarten. We've really changed their approach in the morning when they come in. It's not a coloring paper anymore. It's called a soft start. And in the soft start, they might have different buckets or different areas in the room, and they can go over and they can build something, or they could draw something, or they might take a book, or they might work with dice and playing cards for math. It's their choice, and it seems like it's working in many ways, not just, in math. It's working as far as social emotional. They're coming in and they're anxious to come into the door because they know what center or what bucket they want to choose from. And they change the buckets up every week. So it's something exciting for the kindergartners to come in. So that is brand new for us. We're also doing small group in math. We've traditionally not done small group in math. It's been whole group for K and 1. So this is the first year that we have changed our whole outlook, and they are doing smaller groups. They do a whole group, first instruction, and then they break off in that period of time. So that is new. Of course, we still have our paras in the classroom, so paras are pulling kids a lot more often now. In the morning, when kids are doing, whatever it is, they're taking their coat off. Oh, Johnny, come on over here with me. And they're going through their number cards and just number recognition, or can you show me 5? Can you write 5? Can you count to 5? Things like that. You didn't see that before. Before, a para was, tying shoes or helping them go to the bathroom, even though they still do that. They're doing a lot more with the academics. And same thing with our remediation para. So we're using them a lot more efficiently. When I say differentiation within the groups, we always did differentiation, but we never broke it down as much as we are. And we're changing those groups. Those groups are flexible. So we're looking at and saying, oh, you 3 need this and you 5 need something like that. These kids are already doing addition. So we're changing those groups as needed as we go along. So I feel like there's a lot of new things going on in kindergarten to really help and to enhance the math scores there. And they're still using the ST Math. It's 60 minutes a week, and they're doing fabulous with that. And you have to remember, kindergarten, they're coming in mixed bag.
Yep.
You have some that have been in our preschool, which is really academic and curriculum focused. You have some coming from more of a daycare type preschool, where it's more play-based. So you're getting that mix of kids. We had quite an emotional social emotional mix last year. Things are a little bit calmer this year, so it's been a huge adjustment for kindergartners. So, and it makes it a lot more challenging for the teachers when you've got them all over the place. You don't know what you're getting either. You have no idea. So that's kindergarten for math. And then in first grade, what we were able to hone in on as we were trying to, fight with the STAR data is problem solving. And I think you've heard that even in the MCAS. It's the problem solving. And for our curriculum, it's all addition, subtraction, and a little bit of money. So our focus is going to be putting word problems together using addition, subtraction, and money, and more of those, and having the teachers model them, have them use the manipulatives. ST Math is great for problem solving. So, but it's more of an independent. And again, new is going to be small group with math as well as ELA, which, ELA has always been a small group, but math hasn't been that way. So they are doing that. I've seen them doing it. It's a lot of work for the teachers to get all those activities. And I said, you don't need 5 groups. You can, break them down into 2 different activities, switch it up every other day, something like that. So we have the math centers. Again, we're doing morning meeting, and so sometimes they'll incorporate some math things in there. We also have the curriculum-based measures, the CBMs through STAR. Grade 1 started them last year. We're also going to have them continue them, and those are the quick, it's a one-to-one assessment. You can do it every 2 weeks, you can do it every month, and so one of them is just number recognition. So the child is just naming the number along the way, and the teacher is using the iPad and just pointing out the ones that are incorrect. So those are quick. The other one is quantity comparison, so the student just sees the 2 and the 5, which one's bigger, and they point to the 1. And so it's that really fast, one-piece assessment, and it gets recorded, so you can see the growth. We can see, oh, gee, they don't know how to do this comparison. They don't know what graded means. So, okay, we go back, use the strategies, reteach that, and then give them the CBM again and see if it's working. So I feel like we're really, getting a better handle on how to address these things. Any questions on KN1 math?
All right, so grade 2, some of the content areas where grade 2 identified that students struggling with fact fluency, money, and telling time. I think fact fluency is something that you'll see that kind of came up across grade levels, whether it's addition, subtraction, second grade to multi-digit multiplication, 4th and 5th grade. And when I'm in classrooms and I'm watching math lessons, I'm seeing it. Kids are doing long division, and when they have to do the multiplication component, there's not a lot of automaticity, which is a prohibitive skill if you don't have it, or it's pervasive if you don't have it. So one of the things on there that in terms of our strategies that I wanted to kind of highlight was kind of one strategy we've talked about is using a format called the Daily Three, which is just some kind of an organizational tool for how you set up your math block. So you have your whole group lesson, mini lesson, 15, 20 minutes, but then you have a breakdown where you might have the teacher pulling a small group, you might have students at a center doing fact practice, you might have a student at a center doing ST math, which is customizable, so you get a lot of differentiation going on throughout, and everybody's getting exposure to that. So I think that's a nice format that we're gonna focus on in second grade. One of the things that was interesting that came up, that a lot, the second grade was the first time a lot of them tested with the Chromebook, and more so in math than in ELA, you get a lot of clicking and dragging, and they said they would have kids would try to click something, lose it, click something, lose it. So that was something that students, teachers did notice. For grade 3, similar to what Mr. Socia said, multi-step word problems were tricky for kids. And again, as I mentioned, fact fluency. That's something that we're seeing come up. And one of the things that teachers are doing is there are some free sites that you can use for fact practice, like Extra Math is one of the sites. So supplemental resources to help reinforce students, whether it's an in-class activity, whether it's a homework, whether it's a station. But teachers are finding ways to supplement our core curriculum with additional practice opportunities, which I think is very important. And that's one of the areas that I want to highlight as a strategy. And for grade 4, and this was kind of mentioned, interesting that we talk about how STAR is a predictor of MCAS. If you notice the areas where 4th grade noticed their weakness, that matches right up with the MCAS breakdown that we had earlier. So that's not a mistake, it's not a coincidence. So those are 2 areas that 4th grade knows that we have to make a concerted effort, whether, okay, so the curriculum might say you spend X amount of time on this fraction unit. Well, if we're not showing that we have mastery of it, or we're not at a proficiency level, then we'll have to spend more time on those. So I told teachers, I wanted them to feel empowered that if they need to spend a little bit more time, then do so. So if you just plug on just because the curriculum map says to, and the student doesn't have that skill, that's just going to snowball, and that's not going to help that student. So.
Are they changing the curriculum map?
No, but I think if there needs to be a reteaching of a skill done, they definitely can do that. To a degree within reason. You can't just completely hijack it, but if you do need to reteach a lesson because students bombed it, well, I think that's appropriate, and that's why that goes back to one of the biggest things of MTSS that you'll see over and over again is the importance of common formative assessments. And it doesn't have to be a big benchmark test. It can be a dipstick exit ticket. It'd be a quick thing at the start of a lesson, but that's why it's so important. If you are testing kids, if you're assessing them consistently, you're going to have a grasp on where they are at that current moment versus wait until the report card time to find out, oh wow, Johnny's bombing. You'll know at any given time if you're consistently assessing kids how Johnny's doing. It doesn't have to be a 20-question test. If they can do 5 questions, they can do 20. So it doesn't need to be anything, So you just need to be continually dipsticking the kids for where they are at the time. And it goes back, and it's just something that Mrs. Socia mentioned too, that one of the things I think grade 4 does, they do a lot of flexible grouping based on a pre-test for the skill, how a kid's doing. So right on the spot, those groups are differentiated to meet that student's individual needs. And I think that's important. It's fluid groups. You're not there forever, depending on the skill. They're going to give you the specific individualized attention needed.
Is that something that's happened more in 4th grade historically than other grades?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I know 4th grade does do that, and I believe a lot of grades do that as well. It's just something I recently had a conversation with the 4th grade teams about, and I think it's a really, so they'll group homogeneously to some districts call it a win block, what I need now. So it's a good tier intervention approach.
And then the other question that I have too is, so when you mentioned giving fractions, decimals more times throughout the year than just later in the year, just like geometry or whatever, how is it that we're making, that's actually ensuring that that's happening consistently throughout every classroom?
So, where it's relevant to that particular grade level, my intent is to meet once a month with each grade level to do a data look. So those are areas where I can dipstick and I can check in and say, how's it going? I'd like to see what kind of work you're doing, Then also, when I look at the middle of the year STAR data, I'll be able to see what kind of growth we've made in those particular standards. Where we can't get an item analysis per se, we can get a standards breakdown. I can look at each kid to see if they're above, on, or below grade level for each standard that is on the STAR test.
Is there going to be more frequent looks at data around these things
Oh, yeah,
before
100%.
before the mid-year benchmarks?
As much as I can, I can go on STAR anytime and pull any data I want, but it has to be on STAR. Whereas if it's in-class benchmarks, it's something that I'd have to just ask the teachers to provide. But when we do have those monthly data meetings, that's the point of it. So yes, definitely.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Okay, going over to the reading. The kindergarten, I was blown away by the kindergarten for early literacy because they did so well, and especially with the kind of, mix of students, like I said. So I thought they did great. For grade 1, this is the one that we're most concerned about, at least I am for my building, because of the dip from mid-year to the end of the year. We still had 48 students. Like I said, there were only 65 that we assessed, but 48 students were at or above. But the 17% is way too high for the on-watch. That was 11 students. The intervention was 4, and urgent was 3. So, and again, we don't have enough to look back and say, is this normal, that from mid-year to end of the year? Because the skills do get more difficult. We don't know that, but we're going to address what we think in the areas that we think were the problems there.
All right, so for grade 2, end of the year was 63%, which for number of students at or above benchmark translates to 60 students out of 96. So 60 were above, at or above, and 36 were below. You'll see they had a massive jump from BOY to MOY, and then remained at the same level from middle to end. Interesting that the on-watch folks, so for now, for third grade, you'll see there was a dip from middle of the year to end of the year overall, but the percentage of students on watch increased. It's kind of a funky one. The on-watch decreased, which is good, but then the intervention kids went up. So it's direct 180 to each other. So that was interesting. And then, so for fourth grade, BOY to MOY, 4% increase, MOY to EOY, 6% increase, so you had a very good upward trajectory going there. On-watch, intervention, and urgent intervention all decreased, so all positive checks in those areas for numbers don't lie on that one. Just shows you here. So what jumps out at me, if you're looking at this, is that 64 out of 83 kids in third grade were at or above benchmark. It's a big number. So it's really, that's the one that just jumps out at me just in terms of pure numerical data.
Just one other thing I thought of as you were talking, on any of those charts, it's just like MCAS, it could be one question. Their score could be that one cutoff between urgent intervention, or the watch to the at or above. It could be all of that one question that put them into that category. So that's something that we're looking at as well. How do we bump those kids that are just right there? So as far as the ELA now, for kindergarten, they are looking at two areas, and one is the phonics, the word recognition, the fluency, and the other is comparing and contrasting adventures. And that sounds really high level for kindergarten, but it's one of their standards and expectations. One nice thing is the kindergarten classes are nice sizes. They're 15 to 16 students, so that is ideal. So you've got 2 adults in the room. And like I said, that remediation para floats in and out, so sometimes there's 3 in the room. So that makes it perfect for doing that, really small group. So when we're saying small group, it traditionally would be 6 kids sitting around the horseshoe table. Well, now it's more like 2 or 3. So that's something that we've gained out of the reading consultant, some advice, and we've been trying it, and the teachers think that, it's really beneficial because you're touching base, you're not spending a whole 20 minutes or half an hour with them. You're kind of, okay, let me hear you guys read. All right, you're off, you go do this, and then bring up the next few kids. So it seems like it's really more individualized than ever. It's not just called small group. To me, it's almost like a one-to-one. The teachers really thought a lot about what they have on these papers, so, I give them a lot of credit for really taking this seriously. Again, that soft start for kindergarten is a huge help. The CBMs, we have similar ones where they're just letter identification, and they're just pointing. So, and that data will just go right into the star for us, so we'll be able to see that, engage what we need to do. It's the differentiation again. It's not that, okay, we're differentiating, they're all, and you walk around, there's 4 groups, and they're all doing the same paper. But that's not what we're doing. It's the same skill, and they're all doing a different activity based on their level. So that's how we're really breaking that down. We also noticed that the kids didn't know the difference between the word in a sentence. There's how many words are in the sentence. They're counting the letters, or they're counting something else. So just some of that knowledge of, sentence structure, how many words are in the sentence. Now we're giving them cards. Can you put the sentence together and make a sentence? Here are all the words, and they know the words, but can you put them together? So it's just different activities like that that will help to bump them up and to move them into the top category, at or above, for kindergarten. Grade 1. Grade 1, I think KN1, I can check too. We had talked about having binders on every child, or having one binder, a data binder, where they're all going to be tracking, because they do their own assessments along the way. Reading Wonders has a great video. It's like on the screen, and the kids can beat themselves. It's kind of like beat yourself to the game, and you have to, it's fluency, it's reading the sight words and the high frequency words. So they love that, and so the teachers can keep track of that, and the kids get excited. Oh, I beat myself. So they're keeping some binders, they're doing some of their own data collection besides the STAR, which is nice. The other thing is that they put down grade 1, one of their focus, it's key ideas and details. Throughout the whole curriculum from K to 4, key ideas and details are there, and it spirals. So no one's expecting mastery usually. I mean, K and 1, these are your foundation years, these are your building block years. This is going to spiral. So in K, for key ideas, it's going to say, with prompting and support, you ask and answer questions about the details. Grade 1, there's no more prompting and support. You just ask the questions. By grade 4, they're drawing inferences. So it's a process all the way through. It's not just a 1 year, you teach it and they're done. This just keeps spiraling all the way through. They're doing more interactive read-alouds. New is going to be a book bag idea, and that again came from the consultant. So the student gets to choose books, and they have an actual bag. The teacher helps put most of those together. Oh, you like animals. Oh, you like dinosaurs. Oh, you like cars. So all those books go into their book bag for that week. And then when they have their centers or their time, they go into their book bag. They can read it. They might bring that book up. It's on their level, so it could be mixed. You wouldn't have the same book bag as someone else because you're not on that level. At the end of the week, the kids are saying, oh, I want to keep that book. So that's awesome right there. I want to keep that one again because I really like that book. And then they'll switch some out. So we're building that book room. We're building those book bags up. They have the high interest levels for the kids. The groups, again, they're smaller. The differentiation is there. And we had some great PD last Friday. The teachers had 2 hours of literacy games, small group activities. They had a packet, I swear, of 30 pages of activities, whether it's roll the dice and the dice have letters on it, whether it's cards with the missing vowel in the middle. So they learned a whole new bag of tricks that they can use. They used them already. They already used them this week. So that was awesome, PD, they loved it. And so that they can put more time on it, and I'm doing walkthroughs, even if it's not a written walkthrough, I'm up and down the hall. I mean, it doesn't take too much for me to go up and down the hallway and peek in each room, and I'm seeing it. I'm already seeing things happening in there, things that were not happening before. Any questions on K and 1?
No, it's awesome. It's awesome news to hear how beneficial I think STARS is going to be, because you're actually able to look at it, get instantaneous, and then do corrective actions, whatever you need to do for that child to succeed. So I'm excited.
I also love that you're having PD that they can implement right away. That's excellent.
Right. And they love it. That helps too.
Cindy and Anthony, can you talk quickly about those quick benchmark assessments that we can do every 2 weeks now with STARS?
That's what I was doing.
Okay.
Those are the CBMs that I was pointing out.
Okay. Oh,
I
okay.
did the ones in math, and then there's fluency where they have to do the oral reading passage. And so it's all based on one-to-one, so it's a matter of pulling the student out of the room to do a quick minute. And then the teacher is recording anything on the iPad. And then we adjust as we go, according to their results. They're great. They're awesome. Title I uses them all the time.
Piggyback that, depending on how it's doing, students in red, you can progress monitor more frequently as you see fit. So you really, that's why this side data is very helpful to be looking at it, not just, leave it in the closet, so to speak. So we also had PD, again, to mention earlier with Ms. Landigan, and teachers are working with her to build up our book room, which grade level is going to have access to books across all genres, different levels, that they're able to sign out and use as whole class, small group. So that's in the process of being built up in conjunction with Ms. Landry. So it's been really good PD. One part of our PD recently that all grade levels participated in was Universal Design for Learning. And one of the activities that we did was we looked at the 3 different categories about how teachers can present information and different ways they could do it. And they were asked to pick 3 skills and content areas that they could implement tomorrow, 2 that they could implement maybe next week, and 1 they could implement down the road. And each one of those, this was information, a link that Dr. Vera had provided, and each one of those had a hyperlink that just shows, so teachers could really look at and say, oh, I could do it this way, but I could tweak this, I could do this. And they were really into it, very receptive to it. It was awesome. They really got a lot out of it. And it's a phenomenal reference for them to go to and pull as needed. So they all have access to that now. We spent a good chunk of our PD day going over that, and it was very well received. So it's funny that Ms. Socia also mentioned key ideas and details, because that's something that we're seeing as well. And that's in 2nd grade especially, being able to differentiate what a main idea is versus a supporting detail is a massive skill that they definitely struggle with. And I think you'll see, as you look at data, you'll see that that's a pervasive skill that kids do struggle with. All right, now they can identify the main idea, but what is a supporting detail? Where are they getting that from? That goes on to being able to cite evidence from the text, which is a huge skill. Because what sometimes that kids fail to realize is what you need to answer an open response or anything MCAS is in the passage. You're not reinventing new words. So being able to use that text evidence is huge. So in 2nd grade, one of the big things we're talking about is specific practice and even reteaching as needed where it comes to supporting details versus main idea. That's a big area for 2nd grade to address, and in conjunction with extending writing assignments, because to build up their stamina, which, as we talked earlier, that was 100% an issue in 3rd grade. So you'll see a couple of the similar things here, sustained writing as well, which we talked about earlier. And one of the areas that the 3rd grade teachers mentioned that they were seeing a lot of kids as they get into 3rd grade working on conventions, spelling, grammar, punctuation. If you've ever watched it, seen a third grade writing piece, a whole paragraph might not have one punctuation mark, right? And it's not abnormal, but that's a big focus in third grade. All right, where does the comma go? What's a compound sentence? Like basic things like that, because otherwise it's just one massive run-on sentence. So again, that's a big piece in third grade that teachers recognized as an area of need. So for fourth grade, kind of what I mentioned earlier, the big piece here is, all right, instead of going from learning to write, you have a lot more involved writing pieces in fourth grade, so then they need to be able to interact with the text, use it appropriately, use it to support their arguments, to support their constructive responses. So being able to cite textual evidence, finding it, using it correctly, and supporting your details correctly, that's a tough skill. And one of the things we talked about as a fourth grade group, as when I met with them, is not making the graphic organizer an optional thing. That's a required part of the writing process. And one of the teachers even mentioned we need to be more deliberate with the writing process and build their skills back up. And a piece of that is very deliberate. You brainstorm, you have a graphic organizer, you have a pre-writing process, you have a rough draft, you conference with the teacher, almost like a writing workshop model. So that was something that definitely fourth grade is going to have a focus on this year.
Can I just put a shout out to my K-1 teachers, because they really worked hard on this, and they've taken ownership of it. So they're really taking it seriously, and they're really working hard. So I appreciate their work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important, is for everybody to be on board and for it to be happening at every level. And I'm super, like, STARS is going to be like my favorite time of day now, my favorite time of year now when that comes out. So I'll be eagerly looking forward to how we progress over the next year. So thank you for all the work that you're doing with this. It's really critical, really important work that you're doing. So I appreciate it.
And to see how well the piggyback with associates, see how well the PD was received and used on the last session was awesome. They were great. So they really worked hard. I couldn't agree more with Ms. Fisher.
I just like, and on a light note, which is when you were talking about the run-on sentences, it just made me laugh inside, because it's like, here you have all those run-on sentences in third grade, and as we're teaching them to improve their writing, it's now becoming like, my daughter texted me something, I was like, what the heck does that mean? It's like 4 little letters, like, imagine what we're teaching these kids to go from these run-on sentences. It's almost like you want to appreciate the run-on sentences, because one day it's going to be like 3 words, almost fragments.
Right.
So, it's funny, the irony.
Or, I one time saw a student when I was teaching, every line of a paragraph was indented, so it looked like a triangle going down the page. Just even things like that, like knowing how to set up a page. If you've never been asked to do it, you need more exposure to it. So not to beat a dead horse, but. All right, thank you, guys.
I'd just like to thank you all for,
Absolutely.
between the MCAS and the STARS, I know it's the beginning of the year, there's a lot going on. For you guys to take the time, as well as your staff and the teachers, to come together and do this collaboration for us, I truly appreciate it.
Agreed, and not just the numbers, but the analysis behind it as well.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is it for me tonight. Or it wasn't me, it was teachers and the principals and the directors who did 99% of the work. So thank you to them.
Okay, now moving on to the school committee and subcommittee report, the accounts payable report.
Do we want to table this until the next meeting?
We can
I'm not
table it to
sure.
the next one, because I know Beth signed these, I do believe.
Yes, that's correct.
So we can table that, so we'll table that to the next one. Moving to the consent agenda, reviewing of the October 5th, 2022 school committee meeting minutes.
I didn't see anything either.
Yeah. Look at me.
If nobody has any issues with it, I'd be looking for a motion.
I move to approve the October 5th, 2022 school committee meeting minutes.
Motion made by
Teresa.
Seconded by Julie. I'm sorry, it's been seconded by Julie. It's a long night. And seconded by Julie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstained? Okay, next. Establish the substitute rates for the Douglas Elementary School and Douglas Middle School for the after-school enrichment programs.
Yes, we did find that, particularly, I guess, with what we've been talking about in the past few years, but last year, we did have some times when instructors for the after-school program, after-school enrichment program, were out, either they're sick or they went there that day or they had to leave, or whatever it was. So we realized that what we needed to do was establish a rate for substitutes, and then we can post for substitutes, have one or two available, so that we don't hopefully, have to upset the program at all, and then have to give notice to parents who can't have it, or anything like that. So just for consistency and keep everything running smoothly, we realized that we needed to establish a rate. We're recommending substitute rate of $20 per after-school class, and also the few times we hope that this happens, that $20 would be deducted from the stipend that the instructor receives at the end, which isn't even half of what they normally get per class. So it's not as if we're taking away the whole amount for that time, but it is going to cost when that instructor can't be there. So we're looking for approval of that, and then we will, if approved, we'll be able to post tomorrow, and the classes just started on Monday for the programs.
I move to approve a substitute rate of $20 per after-school enrichment program class taught when the instructor is unable to instruct due to being absent. An adjustment will be made to the stipend for each instructor for amounts paid to substitutes.
Motion made by Julie, second by?
Second, Monique.
By Monique. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Thank you. Next is the School Business and Operations Manager's Report.
Fortunately, did not get to transfers and reclassifications. I know you're sad about that, taking more time for that, right? So we can move right on to the FY 2021 Douglas High School Student Activity Fund audit. I did provide that to you. There was one finding regarding the principal not signing off on one deposit that they had pulled. So I did, you'll see the response that I gave as well. I do want to tell you that Elaine does an excellent job trying to keep everybody on track at the high school. So she was really irritated over this. So I said, listen, you do a great job. I mean, you really, really, really try hard to keep everything. So anyway, just want to make that point. They try very hard to keep everything in good stead there, so.
Now, is this, we had talked about this last meeting, whereas this would now be potentially done in-house?
No, this is the high school. The high school has to be done every year by a CPA because the amount of revenue that we bring in from the Disney trust.
Right, the other schools.
Yeah, it's the middle school that we can do the internal audit that we need to do for FY '22, and this is for FY '21, by the way.
All right.
Now we're going to be starting the FY '22 for the high school. So, yeah.
Okay.
And this just goes to show the level of detail that the auditors get into with the amount of receipts that we collect. If you think of just a prom,
And we look at absolutely
that
everything.
they cited us for one receipt.
Well, actually, to your point, remember, I did, in line with that, I did provide the audit, the compliance audit guidelines. I mean, it's like this, it's bigger than, it's just, you would think student activity funds, but, yeah, student activity funds is very serious business, really, and, yeah. So we have to go by, that's why I provided it to you, Jean and I would have to go by those same exact, go through that entire list to do the middle school audit.
Okay.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions?
Nope. Do we need to make a motion to approve this, or
No, just providing it to you.
just more information?
Yes.
Good job.
Yep. Any topics not anticipated?
There are not.
So I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the October 19th school committee meeting at
8:58.
8:58.
Motion made by Monique, second by Teresa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining?